Well, thank you very much for invigorating us after lunch. The next panel discussion, and the first one this afternoon, will be on foreign portfolio investments. So will the moderator and panelists please come up? Yeah, you sit over there, right?
Good afternoon, I'm Viraj Kulkarni. And I think after a very beautiful story session that we had from Ashish, I'll try to match, and after coming after a guy who's good at, stories, stories, we need to, have a story. So, which matches or at least comes close. So, what we thought is we'll take one of the most interesting developments which happened over the last 1 year, which is the foreign portfolio investors. And what's very interesting and probably the first time in the country which has happened is a very diverse panel on the subject. So what we have is we have the SEBI represented by Rohit Dubey. We have the National Stock Exchange, Nagendra. We have Stockholding Corporation, Anand.
Hi.
We have ENY as in Samir.
Hi.
And Rana Rajan from Credit Suisse. So it's a combination of an exchange, a regulator, a custodian, a tax, and a broking entity. So you can't get as diverse as possible on this particular subject. Now, before I hand it over to our panelists, I thought it'll be good to summarize some of these key developments in the FPI space, because there's always a lot of talk about what exactly it is and where have we progressed. So this afternoon, we are not going to get into the regulations part of it, but basically moving on to what were the outcomes out of the regulations and the next steps. Now, in summary, I'll just set the tone. In summary, basically some of the developments is the FPI regulation basically follows the global model of risk-based approach, and this is the same thing with regard to the KYC. For the first time in 25 years of SEBI, since SEBI's inception, what we have is absolute allowing of non-broad-based funds to come into the country. The DDPs are following the global model, basically of opening accounts at the DDP level rather than the SEBI doing it. The policymaker for it has shifted from being involved in a process, because earlier the policymaker also used to do the registration, but now what they're doing is staying true to what's pertinent, which is making policies. And I must also say, not just policies, probably SEBI is one of the most proactive regulators I've seen, where they also have come out with 150 plus FAQs on FPI, has also held workshops for custodians, brokers. It's very unusual and something that you normally don't see. FPI, we had a freedom at midnight. The first transaction happened at the midnight and was carried out by NSDL with one of the leading custodians. So never in the history of India you have a registration happening at the stroke of midnight. So no midnight blues. I think things have worked well. The NSDL's website is very revealing, as in the FPI statistics are very well put out there. What's also important to note is FPI also opened doors for Indian custodians. There are totally about 19 custodians or DDPs, as we may say. And what we have is in this piece of business, FPI, the domestic custodians got an opportunity to play the field, because a custody business primarily is driven by global custodians. 75% of the business that comes to the country is through global custodians. But now we have custodians like Stockholding, SDFC, ISSL, etc., playing the game. Stock exchanges, custodians, brokers, SEBI hit the road. I'll leave it to them to come on what they've done. The backdrop of this, what's also important is to understand whether the marketing and the approach that has been taken by the various intermediaries has been appropriate or complete, and what next to be done. The second is the budget of 2015, what promises it holds out for FPI. And finally, the new regulations, will it enable the promised $5 billion that we're looking at on an annualized basis on the category 3? Now, with this, what I'll do is open the questions and to start with Samit. And Samit, what are your thoughts on the budget proposal, especially with regard to MAT, GAR, DR?
All very controversial words. But I think that if I was to talk through some of the key points from the budget relevant to FPI, I think clearly the big expectation around GAR, right? It was first brought in 2012 under Pranab Mukherjee. Deferred several times. It was to go live on 2015. And as you know, it happens with every budget cycle, there was a lot of clamoring to again defer it. This time at least, I think, with the whole pro-investment cycle, the growth agenda of the government, rightfully the deferral for GAR for 2 years, in that sense, was a very welcome step. I think the key point in GAR that you can actually, feel good about is, which could be the silver lining really, is that all investments up to 31st March 2017 will be grandfathered. So earlier, they were only going to give grandfathering till investments made till 2010. But really, this was, in many ways, not something which everybody expected this government to already clarify. So in that sense, it's a huge positive that everybody has got to say that it will apply, therefore, to only investments which are going to be made post April 1, 2017. That's on GAR. The other area which does affect FPIs is the entire indirect transfer provisions. So again, in the same budget of 2012, there was a provision introduced which basically said that if any foreign company or if any foreign investor transfers any share or interest in a foreign company which derives substantial value from India or Indian assets, then they would be subject to the provisions of the indirect transfer provisions. And really, since then, for last 3 years, there has been lack of clarity as to what is the, how do you interpret some of these words, like what is substantial value. I think that on some of these big items, the FM has clarified basically to say that substantial value of assets for a foreign company will be 50% upwards, which is a huge point, because there was a debate, will it be 20, 25, will it be 1/3, or will it go up to 50? So in that sense, it's a welcome clarification. There has also been clarity now that only the proportionate amount of gain that pertains to the assets which yield the gain from Indian assets will be taxable in India. So that's again a very welcome point that's been clarified. And the other is really that small value shareholders in the foreign company, defined as less than 5%, will be completely out of the purview of the indirect transfer provision. I think when you look at all this and you say that, okay, is it a huge positive for FPIs? I think that the point which becomes important is that FPIs as a class wanted to be exempted from indirect transfer provisions. And that's not really happened. And therefore, it does really, that does leave some concern, because, you could have some structures where you have two-tiered structures, where you have a feeder fund in Luxembourg with a sub-fund in Mauritius or Singapore, which invests in India. And really, any transactions that take place between the feeder fund and the master fund, in terms of redemption of shares over there, those seem to be still caught by the indirect transfer provision, which clearly is not a happy outcome. And therefore, I think there is still work needed from an FPI perspective. The other key point is for all the debt funds, the extension of the 5% withholding on interest paid out on listed corporate bonds and government securities. The withholding tax and the tax applicable is 5% currently. So that's again been extended by another 2 years. So clearly all of these are very positive, Viraj, and things to look after for. I think you did ask about MAT as well.
MAT as well, yeah.
So MAT is a big challenge. What we've been seeing in this year's tax audit proceedings is that the tax office is really looking at asking foreign investors, FPIs, private equity, as well as some FDI companies, as to why MAT should not be applied to them. And for the last so many over years, this has never been an issue, simply because, as we all know, all of these investors have no place of business in India. and really therefore don't keep books of accounts as per Indian requirements, etc. So the interpretation on this has always been judicial as well as in practice, that MAT is not applicable per se to all of these institutions. And because of these proceedings, again, industry went to the government and said this is unfair and will really be the death nail on a lot of items of income where there is concessional taxation, like the 5% interest which I just spoke about. Because if MAT is applicable, then the tax rate goes straight towards 20%. That this is very unfair. The budget actually says that MAT will not apply to gains on transactions in securities to an FPI. And that's really where the concern lies, because what they should have done is simply to say that MAT will not apply to any income made by a foreign investor, being an FPI fund, etc., etc. But they've chosen to use certain language which really means 2 or 3 things. One, that you may be still subject to compliance in terms of calculating the book profit, but then they will give you a carve out for gains in transactions in securities. But that's not enough, because as we know, FIIs, especially debt FIIs, do earn interest from India, which is not gains from transactions in securities. So those interest income items can be subject to a higher rate. And even trading in government securities, short-term gains, those could again, on which STT is not paid, can again get trapped in some of these points. And the way the amendment reads, it says it will be effective April 1, 2015 onwards, which means that for the past it was applicable on everything. So the back years is a bigger issue to my mind, and a real issue in the way in which the amendment is worded.
Thanks. I think another development in the DR is with regard to the depository receipts. And just for a point that I want to share is the South Committee report was a very forward-looking report on developments that would herald a lot of changes into the depository receipts, and there was a lot of expectancy that it would get operationalized, and that's on hold for some time now. So moving on to how does the new regime, which is the FPI, sort of differ from the FI and the QFI? Rohit, what's your thought?
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Viras, for giving me this opportunity to speak on this platform. I'm Rohit Dubey and working in FPI team in SEBI, and fortunately I've been part of the FPI team who has worked on the implementation of the FPI regime. So before I speak on the difference between the FI regime and the erstwhile QFI or FI regime, I would like to give a little background. During 2012, SEBI formed a committee under Mr. K.M. Chandrasekhar to rationalize the different investment routes. And the committee had around 25 stakeholders, including BSE, of course, and we had a lot of deliberations, and ultimately one of the important outcome of the committee was to merge the QFI and sub-accounts into FPI. Once the committee gave us the recommendations, SEBI worked on the recommendations of the committee, we took government's concurrence, and then later on we came out with the SEBI FPI regulations. Needless to say that we have been taking review from the DDPs every now and then, and we have been getting very positive feedback from the DDPs, all the custodians rather, that the response has been very encouraging. And to highlight few of the differences between the FPI regime and the QFI or FI regime, I would say that earlier the investors used to come to SEBI for taking registration. So now this direct registration requirement with SEBI has been done away with in the FPI regime. So any investor who is going to approach DDP for opening of your depository account, your cash account, the same entity will open, the same entity will grant the registration to the investor. So the investor need not come to SEBI for taking registration. Earlier, individuals and foreign corporates, they had only 5% investment limit in a company, and now with FPI, of course, all the investors, we have given 10% limit individually. Earlier QFIs, we had a lot of representations from QFIs that they were required to route their orders through the QDPs. Now these QFIs, we have merged QFIs into FPIs, they can directly place their order with the brokers. So there, and plus the most important thing, in the FI regime we had uniform KYC norms in place, and now in the FPI regime we have categorized the investors based on the perceived risk profile, like category 1, category 2, category 3. So category 1, like government owned entities, category 2, the regulated entities, and category 3 is residual entities, non-regulated entities. So we have done the KYC based on the categorization of the investor. Anything else you want to add, Anand?
Yeah, thank you, Rohit. Good afternoon. As Rohit mentioned, this categorization of investors into the various categories of a based on risk-based approach has opened up a lot of avenue for local custodians like us. Okay, we are basically a local custodian, and we can handle investments of any ticket sizes. Okay, and as Rohit mentioned, this risk-based approach and different categorization of investors into category 1, 2, and 3 has enhanced the documentation process for individuals, small corporates, trusts, and endowment funds, and all that. Okay, and there's a higher level of checks which are required to perform before registering these clients, and this this also becomes faster because earlier all the applications used to go to SEBI for registration and entry into India. But with 19 DDPs or 20 DDPs and custodians operating in the country, all these applications from foreign investors are spread out over all these 20 DDPs, with the result that the registration process has become much faster. Although the individual clients, you need to handhold them and take them through the process of registration and the entry process, the process flow in the Indian market structure, but still this is much faster, and the whole work is spread out across so many DDPs.
Right. Rana, any thoughts from a broking perspective?
From a broking perspective, and as a practitioner or dealing with clients, for me the biggest advantage I see is the transparency that we see in the entire regulation, one. Two, having all the requirements at one place under the FPI regulation, you know exactly what is it that you are required to do if you have to become an FPI and come into India. That's one, about transparency. Two, I need to go to only one single DDP, one single stop, whereas when we deal with otherwise a foreign investor, you'll have to advise them, you first appoint a custodian, you also have to get a PAN number, you'll have to route your application to the regulator via the custodian or directly. Then all of this, I don't want to call it inconvenience, but actually it is administratively a little difficult for somebody sitting offshore to manage it. So technically now with the DDP as a single point of contact, it makes life much easier for anyone who is dealing with it. Two, as I said, on terms of the transparency, what is it expected out of a foreign investor in terms of disclosure? Be in the form of the application form, what is required, it's very clearly laid out there. Two, by way of some 150 odd FAQs issued by SEBI, which is available to everyone, even as a client, they know how the evaluator is going to evaluate your application. What is it that they are going to look at it? That gives them a clear perspective of how should one submit information which can actually be successful in the first go itself. Because otherwise you are submitting an application to the regulator, you do not know how it is going to be evaluated. Here you know mostly the answers, expect some subjective interpretation here and there. So that makes it really easier, or rather the perception which the investors have about India is a country where you have very difficult documentation, that is brought down to a very large extent. Third is the transfer. The KYC information is again another always a roadblock when it comes to investors. So they have clearly laid down one simple one-page chart, which let's say is category 1, category 2, category 3, which is probably 13 or 14 rows. That's about it. So if you look at it, you know where do you fall, what are the documents required. Earlier, people used to say that I don't want to share my photo, I don't want to share my identification document, so on and so forth. Now it's clear what is it that you have to disclose. You know upfront what are you getting into before making an application. So that has changed the perception a lot insofar as the investors, the way they look at India as a destination for coming in and seeking a fresh license. So that's the key thing which I look at it as a perception change. In many ways, many of the information which are compiled there was earlier was pre-existing, many of them. Now they have been pretty much compiled into a much more user-friendly and presented much in a better fashion, I would say. Plus some additional new stuff has been and put in. Plus the FAQ, which I said, which gives people comfort about how an application is going to be evaluated. So that's the way I would view it. And also taking out that subcategorization of earlier one should have an FII and the FII license expires before the sub-account. The sub-account has to strangle for trying to get another sponsor. So all of them have been given away, and now there is each client has an individual identity with no dependence on an FII or anyone. So you straight away come into the DDP, get an FPI license, and you're done with it, so long as you keep paying the fees and meeting other regulatory obligations. You are independent and you can perform. There is no dependency on another sponsor or an FI. So those are all simplification, in my opinion, and makes life easier, and therefore you can expect more and more people to come into the country through this route.
Thanks, Rajan. Just for information perspective, in the first 3 months of this calendar year, the total investments which has come into the country is about 5 billion on the equity side, and on the debt is about 6, so about 11 billion. And clearly, I think the new regulations has made entry easy. More importantly, the cost of entering the country has become easier because the documentation for category 1 and 2 has just been simple. Yeah. And I think it makes India more attractive from that perspective. So with that as a theme, as in India is becoming more attractive, and what I would do is move on to the next one, which is these positive changes. What does it mean or translate as in advantages? Or also as well as impacts, So let me ask Nagendra, from an exchange perspective, what do you see as the positives and impacts?
Thanks, Viraj. Now that I'm sitting next to Rohit, I think, I'll take this opportunity to congratulate the SEBI team. I mean, though I've interacted with Rohit multiple times when this groundwork was being done, I mean, this is the first time I'm seeing him. So, So it's an excellent effort put in by the regulatory team for the simple reason that, the entry norms to the country have been eased out. In the sense, earlier there were a lot of talk saying coming into India is difficult, opening an account is difficult, you have to wait for at least 6 to 12 months to get an FII registration. So all those things have been ironed out with a very simplified procedure based on the risk profile of the investor. So that's the background. And if I have to talk about, how has it impacted the exchange? I mean, I'm going to structure whatever I'm going to say into 3 parts. So one is in terms of the advantage. From an exchange point of view, I mean, we only look at the inflows, right? So what this FPI regime has brought about is that earlier there was a concept of FII and a sub-account, right? That has been completely removed. So what it means is all these sub-accounts will also be treated as an individual FPI. So from a purely derivatives point of view, earlier all the positions, I mean, the exposure that, the exposure limits were computed based on an FII and all the sub-accounts put together. So now every FPI will have an individual limit. So if I have to give you an example, earlier if the FII was given a limit of 500 crores, we used to take all the sub-accounts under the FII and we used to monitor that they should not exceed 500 crores. Now what it means is that every sub-account, if you are categorized as 1 and 2, you will be able to go up to 500 crores. That's purely on the derivative side. On the equity side, what I would like to say is, it's more of an impact sort of a thing. Earlier, all the FIIs were margined only on T+1. So there was no upfront margining. But now based on this categorization, again, taking into consideration the risk profile of the investor, of the 7,000 FIIs, Rohit, some 80 of them have been identified as category 3. For them, the upfront margining has been introduced. In the sense, people who are enjoying the benefit of paying margins on T+1 have been asked to.
Only in case of
individuals, corporates, and family offices. Only these 3 categories under the risk grade 3 have been asked to pay upfront margins. And they've also tried to streamline something on the ODIs. So, We have not seen the impact of that because we have not measured the numbers directly at the exchange, but by going by what NSDL has published, the ODI numbers are definitely on the higher side. So this is what, from an exchange point of view. One submission, Viraj, which I would like to make here is that, we interact with a lot of potential investors and existing investors, and, we have done a lot of roadshows as well. One point which I feel that, which is not addressed or which is definitely being considered is that, most of the pension sovereign or the big guys, the category 2 guys, they don't directly interface with the DDPs here, right? The DDPs here are well versed with the operational procedures, the guidelines, they interface with the regulator directly. But all these top funds, they connect with only their global custodians. So when we talk to them, they're not aware of the conversion procedures. So when we are trying to, talk about what is required for somebody to come into India and set a shop, we should also focus on the conversions. I mean, my understanding is that there are close to 6,000, 7,000, everything will get converted in the next 3 years. See, the quantum of work left with DDPs is humongous, and, I thought, it's a point that, I want to bring it to the table.
Right. Anand, any thoughts as a custodian?
Yeah, as a custodian, we feel that this categorization and the entry of the category 3 clients into the market actually increases the depth of the market, the equity market, both equity and the debt side. The market volumes have increased, will definitely increase going forward. And some of the impacts which I see with this category 3 investors coming in is most of these category 3 clients are unregulated entities abroad. They don't come under any particular regulator. They are mostly individuals, your family offices, corporates. And that sort of increases the compliance which need to be done at the DDP level. The documentation which we need to get from these clients, the compliance, the SDN checks, the AML norms which we need to follow, these are increased vis-a-vis comparatively what used to happen with, let's say, a regulated entity, a mutual fund or a pension fund, which is there in category 1 or 2. So this is some impact which we need to, this increases compliance cost also for the DDPs, and also the process is also lengthened in the sense that these clients are not well versed with we need to handhold them, we need to teach them about the Indian market, to talk to them about the market structure, tell them the various documents required. It is very clearly laid down by SEBI, they have done a great job. But telling each of the individual clients and these corporates that this is what is required, this is how we should go about it, this is what is required, and why this is needed, why these documents are needed to register yourself. It's a process which we need to go through and educate the investor before entering into India.
Yeah, I think Anand, you brought a very important point because of the 8,500, I think, FIF and sub-accounts, as we now call them, about FPI. Most of them are the category 1 and 2. So they've already discovered the market, they've already understood how India is a T+2 market, a depository, etc. But the new segment, which is basically the non-broad-based funds, need a hand-holding, or let's call it investor education, as in telling what the country is about, how the settlement processes work, what are the products. I think that's one area, and obviously, category 3 is a high risk, so which basically means the DDPs need to put in investments.
In terms of SDN checks, in terms of AML norms, the compliance requirements, the KYC norms, that need to be invested. We need to have a stricter compliance regime in place before we start inducting these clients into the country.
Anything from a CPS?
No, I just think that, when the QFI regime was there was a lot of challenges with how the taxation for QFIs would work in terms of, the obligations on the DDBs, custodians to actually remit the taxes. All of that obviously has been done away with. So there is a uniform process that is followed by every category. And I think that's a huge positive for especially the QFIs who are being left out. And again, the deemed basis of taxation for capital gains, which came in June when Jaitley gave the interim budget, that was again a huge item. So overall, the conversion at least, or the movement from QFI to FPI has been a huge positive for several segments.
Okay. I think the next question I have is basically again, going to Rajan. What strategies, given all these changes that we've been talking about and the building blocks that have been happening right from KYC as well as the FPI, etc., what steps or what strategies you think would be, basically, need to be thought through not as a corporate strategy, but just generally at a country level, what do you think? Do you think investor education needs to be more, or what has been your, what are the inputs you're getting from investors?
See, investor education, I think there is a fair amount of information broadcast which is happening. But there are areas where we still can work on further transparency on the minimum standards that can be followed. So, for example, we have built something like a KRA, which is, I believe, a very unique proposition which we have built in the country for having a common depository for KYC information and avoiding duplication, and hence troubling, or rather less trouble for the clients in duplicating the exercise. But if we have to look forward, now that we have 8,000 plus FPIs getting registered, having their database built in, what do you see next? 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, the information that you have in the KRA will start getting outdated. Okay. So there would be expectations that who will start updating that information. So I have always been trying to at least try to bring in the idea that somewhere if the regulator is directly able to convey to these intermediaries, because I consider an FPI also as an intermediary, not in the technical terms, but they are a regulated entity or an entity who is getting a license to come and invest into the country, and therefore have certain regulatory obligations to follow the rules that are prevailing in the country. So they themselves, if they start self-submitting information into the repository, common minimum information, so the repository starts getting auto-updated rather than 20 different brokers or the DDPs chasing them. Because one biggest challenge whenever we reach out to a customer asking for an information, what they ask is, where is it written in the regulation? Can you please show us that? Each time we are faced with that question on, can you please show us the exact regulation where this particular information is asked for? So, so updation of this information is, in my opinion, is an expectation. But if you ask me to point out where exactly it is written in as many words where I can go and ask the client 3 years down the line, can you please give me an updated so-and-so information? I would be hard pressed. So those kind of, I'm saying, looking forward to set the platform. We have set the platform, but we have to look forward in terms of how can we maintain it in the same standard and not to hit a roadblock at a later stage saying that, now what do? I have 10,000 clients. Now how do I get them updated? So if you start putting in the initial phase itself, that these are preconditions, don't come into India, and it is the case in any country also, that you need to have information updated with time.
Very quickly, I think Nagendra and Rohit, what have the initiatives been from, I know you've been doing workshops, etc. Can you just quickly elaborate on some of these steps that you've done to propagate the FPI culture, or strategies that you've taken to basically build your own business, NSE?
So from NSE side, what we have been doing is that the investor relations has been always one of the key focus areas. Now that with the new FPI regime, there were a couple of roadshows that we did across the globe. We did one with the SEBI chairman as well, right? The whole idea is to meet potential FPIs where the chairman spoke about the easing of norms. Why is India a better place to invest? That is one. And another key point that I wanted to make, Viraj, is that, the category 3, that is the one segment which has not been given the adequate focus. And I'm sure, you were the one who did a workshop for all the custodians at NSE. We engaged to pivot to get in. So if equal attention is also given to category 3, because, when we went to Middle East, most of them there were category 3 and nobody was aware of, the procedures. So there are very few custodians who are, focusing on category 3. So that, if we can work with all the custodians who want to get into this business of having category 3 participants in their books, we'll be more than happy to, work with them and see how we can look at that 5 billion number that you were talking about.
Thanks. Right, then you want to?
Yeah, in the recent past, SEBI had a lot of workshops and as well as the road shows abroad where our representatives were there, and we have had a good, fruitful discussion with the investors, and we got a very positive response. Apart from that, we keep on meeting DDPs on a regular interval, and to our understanding, the response has been very positive from all the categories, category 1, category 2 and category 3. As far as the procedure for registration as well as conversion and KYC also is concerned, as Mr. Rajan pointed out very clearly, that now with our September 12th circular, we have spelled out the documentation requirement for each of the category 1, category 2, category 3. Because as far as our understanding is concerned, the investors find it very difficult to part away with their information, POI and POA. So we have clearly mentioned the documentation requirement for each of the categories through our circular. Plus in our FAQs also, we have outlined the procedure for registration as well as for conversion. So we have been trying every possible effort to make the life simpler for the foreign investors.
Thanks. Anand, quickly.
Yeah, as Nagendra said, I think for category 3, which is a big chunk which has not yet come into the country, what we should take is have a sort of joint conference or workshop or roadshow, whatever you call it, okay, across with a panel of experts, okay, including the custodian, the DDP, the bank, the CPA, and of course the exchanges and the depositories, so that one shot to meet the investor, you talk to them, answer all his queries about the market structure, about the entry process, okay, all his queries are answered, and he doesn't have to come back to various participants, intermediaries again and again and clarify his doubts or everything. I think this will help in attracting more flows and getting these clients into the country.
Yeah. So essentially the strategy needs to be different for category 3 versus what we have been doing it all these years. That's,
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. There's something interesting. Ashish is not here, but something that I just want to share with you is last week the Bombay Stock Exchange actually hosted a special call basically for foreign investors on the union budget, and these are the initiatives or even the road shows. The last week, the meeting that the NSE arranged.
We had a meeting with the finance
FM,
minister.
etc. These are initiatives that the exchanges are stepping up in educating the FPIs about the changes. So, these are some things that I thought I'll share with you. Now, before I come to my last question, Samir, I have one quick one and a very short reply if I can. Can you explain the framework that the budget talks about for, fund manager exemption?
I'll try my best.
1 minute less.
No, so I think that per se it's a very good proposal. Basically what they're saying is that the location of the fund manager should be tax neutral to the fund, in the sense that you have an offshore fund, and what they want to basically say is that if it is managed completely from onshore, then that should create no further taxation for the fund in India, either through residency or through business connection or through permanent establishment. So that's the concept. But as is always the case in some of these things, there are very prescriptive conditions to be met with respect to the fund and the fund manager. And I think those will obviously need to get clarified. But per se, it's a great development. It's like, trying to create what Singapore or Hong Kong has from a fund management perspective onshore in India.
Okay, thanks. That was crisp. Good. Okay, the last question I have for the panel is, except for Rohit, and this is one wish that you have from the policymakers relating to the FPI. Rana.
I don't know whether we can and ask the SPA, under the FPA regulation is pretty new, so my only request here minds open for further improvisation and suggestions on this. We know that a lot of work has gone into formulation of the SPI, but I don't think this will be the end. There should be expectations that there will be more issues would come up for improvisation, and the regulators should be open for it, even if it's come tomorrow.
So since Rohit is not going to raise, I think I'll have two to my list. This is more from the participants with whom we interact. One is a block window mechanism where blocks can be executed on the equity side, because that has been one of the everlasting wish list item for most of the FPIs. So that's number one. And number two is on the option side, if when you exercise, today we charge around 12 bips, whereas at the time of STT. So it may not be with SEBI, but just to the policymakers. The policymakers can look into that and see if that can be brought down. So this is purely from the investors, not from the exchange.
Yeah, okay, the new regime has just come into place, not even about 6 months or 7, 8 months old. What we request from the regulator is to, we keep dialoguing with them, and then as we gain experience, see if these things can be put in a different way, or things based on experience, how to keep on fine-tuning the regulations and keep on changing it as and when required. That's what we say.
Yeah, I think my 2 bits on this is, I've been in this industry for quite some time here and overseas, and in all fairness, SEBI, in my own experiences with them, has been probably one of the most open, regulator, and coming out quite engaging, etc. So I think, there is a lot of positivity that I've seen, even the way they roll out the workshops, etc. So I think the message is that, just keep it going, and we keep getting better. So with this, what I'll do is I'll open the floor for questions, so if anybody's got some, take it. Okay. Seems there are no questions out there. Probably the panelists were so clear that they've not left any room for new thoughts. But yeah, thank you, gentlemen, for being on the panel, and also for your thoughts. And to our audience, what I would say is you still have a chance to ask your questions during the tea break or the evening. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.